Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon once again. May I introduce you to the management team from Maruti Suzuki. Today, we have with us our CFO, Mr. Ajay Seth, Executive Director Marketing and Sales, Mr. Shashank Srivastava, Executive Director of Finance, Mr. D.D. Goyal, Executive Vice President Finance, Mr. Pradeep Garg, Executive Vice President Corporate Planning and Government Affairs, Mr. Rahul Bharti, Vice President Finance, Mr. Sanjay Mathur. The Concall will begin with a brief statement on the performance and outlook of our business by Mr. Seth, after which we will be happy to receive your questions. May I remind you of the safe harbor? We may be making some forward-looking statements that have to be understood in conjunction with the uncertainty and the risk that the company faces. I also like to inform you that the call is being recorded and the transcript will be available at our website. I would now like to invite our CFO, Mr. Seth. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Nikhil. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This year, the automobile industry has seen a significant decline in sales owing to several factors. One of the main factors is increase in the cost of acquisition of the car due to various reasons coming together, like implementation of more stringent safety and emission norms, increase in vehicle insurance expenses, and hike in road taxes in many states. Along with this, the lower availability of finance and increased down payment requirement have affected the affordability of customers to own cars. The domestic passenger vehicle industry declined for 5 consecutive quarters, with Q2 financial year 20 witnessing a volume decline of 28.7% over the same period last year. All three sub-segments within the passenger vehicles witnessed the decline. The sale for passenger cars, utility vehicles and vans declined by 37.2%, 3% and 45.2% respectively over the same period last year. The company was also impacted by the demand weakness and the domestic sales declined by 31.4%. Export shipments at 25,798 units also declined by 12.4% during the quarter. The shift in consumer demand towards petrol segment is now even more evident, with petrol segment now contributing to 66.7% of passenger vehicle industry domestic sales during the quarter. For the company, the contribution of petrol increased further from 74.2% in Q2 financial year 19 to 77.5% in Q2 financial year 20. The quarter witnessed the launch of 2 new models, a premium MPV XL6 and a mini SUV Espresso. The response to both the new models is encouraging. As you would be aware, the company had also progressively initiated the transition to BS6 norms timelines. Now, 8 of our top-selling models are compliant with BS6 norms. This will help the company and its stakeholders navigate the transition to BS6 in an orderly manner. Turning to the financial performance in Q2 financial year 20, the company registered net sales of 1,61,204 million, lower by 14% over the same period last year. The operating profit was 6,802 million, lower by 39.8%, and net profit stood at rupees 13,586 million, lower by 5.4% compared to the same period in previous year, largely on account of lower sales volume, higher sales promotion expenses, and higher depreciation expenses, partially offset by cost reduction efforts, higher fair value gains on industrial surplus, and reduction in corporate tax rates. Negative operating leverage is one of the main reasons of the decline in profitability. While the company has added capacity, the volume declined, leading to several pressures on profitability. The company is conscious of the current down cycle and is making all possible efforts to contain costs. Benefits have accrued in the current quarter as well on account of cost reduction efforts. We can now take your questions, feedback, any other observation that you may have. Thank you.
So we can open the call for a Q&A session, right? Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now begin the question-answer session. Anyone who wishes to ask a question may press star and 1 on their touchtone telephone. If you wish to remove yourself from the question queue, you may press star and 2. Participants are requested to use handset while asking a question. Ladies and gentlemen, we will wait for a moment while the question queue assembles. I would also request participants to please restrict your question to 2 per participant. You may rejoin the question queue if you have a follow-up. We take the first question from the line of Jay Kale from Elara Capital. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for taking my question. So my first question was regarding your realization increase QOQ. If you can just, so ASP QOQ increase, if you can just allude to the factors which has led to this, and I'll come for more questions. Yeah.
So I think the reason for realization increase is primarily, as we mentioned, that there were safety norms introduced in certain models, and there was also transition from BS4 to BS6. So there was a cost that was passed on to the consumers. So to that extent, the realization is gone up.
Okay, and regarding the diesel portfolio, I mean, you've mentioned that you'd be kind of, exiting diesel at least for the time being from April 2020. But recently, media reports suggest you've launched Ertiga, Ertiga diesel variant for fleet operators. So, and also you had mentioned that you'd be taking feedback from the customers to assess whether to go ahead with diesel and BS6. So, in your initial feedback, in the last 5 to 6 months, what is your feedback from the customers, whether they are willing to pay more for diesel, and since we are just 6 months to the transition, how are you looking at this space now?
Actually, you're right that we did make an announcement that for as far as BS4 diesel is concerned, going forward, we won't be converting to BS6 because the costs related to that conversion will be so high that especially in the smaller segment, it may not make sense to have a BS6 diesel. Now, when you said that what is our initial estimate on our findings on sort of research which we have done, actually at this time the research does not make sense because we really don't know what would be the prices of the BS6 diesel models, if at all, from our competitors. So once we are clear of that, then it's possible for us to do a more detailed study. And as such, the decision of whether to go in for BS6 diesel, in a larger diesel, would obviously be made after this study is complete.
Okay, and just on your espresso, if you can just speak a little about your recent launch, how has been the response, waiting period, and what is the kind of customer profile that you're seeing, whether it's first-time car buyers and any cannibalization with the existing products? How are you seeing that product shaping up?
Yeah, so we are very pleased with the response that Espresso has had so far. We have got roughly 16,500 bookings so far, which means at a rate of around 700, 750, that range of bookings per day. So that's a pretty good response, I would say, at this time. Regarding the type of customer, we have done a very sort of a dipstick study. So that's there are the pattern seems to be not very different from our other A segment cars. However, since we have only delivered so far about 6,000 or so vehicles, we would be able to give you a more definitive customer profile of the Espresso customer once we have had enough deliveries.
Okay, great. Thanks and all the best. Come back.
Thank you. Next question is from the line of Jinesh Gandhi from Motilal Oswal Securities. Please go ahead.
Hi, sir. Can you throw light on how did our retail sales pan out in 2Q and in Navratras?
Q2, you want to find out the details of Q2?
Yeah.
So Q2, of course, I can give you exact numbers here because Q2 is over. So there was about, overall Q2 down was about 22%.
Okay. And Navratras would also be
I didn't get you. With the second part?
Navratras also would be similar? Navratras and Dussehra?
No. So that is what I'm saying. This is overall Q2, which of course, as you know, includes July and August as well. So if you are looking at Navratras, which started only on 29 September, going on till 8th of October, there, and last year the Navratra period were actually 10th October to 18th October. So if you compare these two periods, so not going by the dates, the English calendar dates, but by the Hindu auspicious and inauspicious period dates, then there has been, actually this year has been, retail has been positive compared with last year.
Oh, so there's a growth in retails. And this would be low single digit?
It's a small growth, but yes, it's a growth.
Okay. Second question to Mr. Seth. Sir, can you share numbers on discounts, exports, spares, and Gujarat volumes?
Discounts this quarter were at, average discounts were at 25,761 compared to 18,758 in the same period last year.
Okay. And exports, spares, and spares revenue and Gujarat volumes?
Exports sales were at 12,295 units. Sorry.
Revenue.
1,229 crores was the export sales.
Right. And spares?
We don't specifically give a segment number, but we have given you domestic and exports.
Sure. And Gujarat volumes? Gujarat plant volumes?
Yeah. So Gujarat volumes were at 82,251 units in this quarter.
Okay. Great, sir. Thanks. I'll come back in queue.
Thank you. Next question is from the line of Yogesh Agarwal from HSBC. Please go ahead.
Sir, hi. Just a couple of questions. So firstly, this demand pickup, so it's flat year on year, which means it's a reasonably strong pickup on a sequential basis. So can you add some color into, what kind of profile of customers which are coming back and why they are coming back? And also related to that, are there certain, so between BS4 and BS6 in your inventory, which models are selling well? Is it BS6 more or is it both the same?
You're right, Yogesh. This sequentially it has got better. That's reflected both in our wholesale and the retail numbers. Just for your information, you would have gathered like August, July retails were roughly 100,000 each. September was better, about 116,000. And October looks to be even better. So, yes, sequentially there has been a good growth, and I think that is also reflected in our inquiry growth, especially for petrol models, and also the booking growth, which is also positive.
And it's for both BS4 and 6. Is there an inventory is also similar for 4 and 6?
Yeah, so as Sethan said in his opening statement, we have introduced 8 models with BS6. Starting with the Alto and Baleno in April. Then we had the Swift and Desire in June, and WagonR in July. And then we had the Ertiga XL6 and the Espresso, which are also BS6. So when we introduce the BS6 models, it is done after the stoppage of production for BS4. And for these models, we have very little stocks left in BS4. So generally speaking, the stocks now for these models we have introduced BS6 is only for BS6. BS4 stock is more or less exhausted.
Okay. So now it has picked up. So you expect this to sustain the pickup, or is it more, you think, bunching up of pent-up demand in the last 6 months? So any color on that?
Yeah, so as today which was pointed out in the press conference also, we really don't have a sort of a crystal ball for finding out exactly is it sustained sort of change that we are seeing. But yes, we have to wait for a couple more months to see whether the upturn persists. And the reason for that is in these times when we have noticed this apparent change in the direction of the retails towards the positive, it's been with the sentiment being positive largely because of higher promo levels and also because of the festive season. So in the absence of these two, whether this sort of retail persists is what we need to make an assessment, and that can be done only after observing for a couple more months rather than today.
Okay. And so secondly on market share, so there is a little bit of a loss of market share because there were launches from competition. One, do you expect with Espresso you will regain that market share, at least in percentage volume terms? And secondly, internally when you look at market share, the sales to Toyota, is it considered part of your share or you consider it as a loss of market share?
No, on the second part of Toyota, we don't count it in our sales surely. So whether our market share is affected by that is still, we have still not come to any conclusion because it is only regarding the Baleno. As far as the market share is considered if we go segment-wise, that is, if you take a look at the passenger car segment, our market share actually went up. In the van segment, which is the C segment, also our market share actually went up in the first half. However, in the SUV segment, which is the B segment, our market share went down. But it's a little more complicated than that, as you may have seen the press conference. There has been a change in the share of the segment itself. So forget our market share. The share of the segment itself in overall sales has changed. Like the A segment, which is the passenger car segment, has actually gone down from 66% to 60%. So this will also be reflected in the market share losses. So a summary, if you want to ask me, our market share has gone up in A and C segment, which is the passenger car and the van segment, but we have lost market share in the D segment, which is the SUV segment. And of course, as you know, in H1, 13 new launches were made by the competition. 10 of them were in this segment.
Very well. Many thanks, sir.
Thank you. Next question is from the line of Amin Pirani from Yes Securities. Please go ahead.
Yes. Hi, sir. Thanks for the opportunity. So my first question was on your depreciation. I mean, if I look at 1H this year over 1H of last year, there's approximately a 30% increase in depreciation on a YY basis, whereas your fixed assets have only gone up by 10%. So is there some accelerated depreciation happening on certain assets which may not be, used after BS6, or what is happening there, if you could help us?
So there is some element of accelerated depreciation in H1 on some of the diesel engine plants, which where the scrap, the ones that some portion of that which will be scrapped has been taken on an accelerated depreciation, and about 160 crores is the impact on H1 on account of that. So that largely explains the reason for increase in depreciation.
Okay. Thank you. And secondly, sir, what's the royalty number for this quarter?
Royalty is at 5.2%, and the total royalty, which is ours and the one that's part of material cost and SMD included, is 845 crores.
Okay. But the SMG royalty will reflect in your raw material line, right?
That's right, yeah, that's right. So, but I'm giving you the combined number.
Of course. Thank you. That's all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question is from the line of Jinesh Gandhi from Motilal Oswal Securities. Please go ahead.
Hello.
Yes.
So there has been, in other expenses, there has been a substantial decline on QOQ basis, despite, if I look at the inventory or higher production, despite that there has been a drop. So any one-offs there, or that's more sustainable number?
You see, other expenditure also includes royalty payments, so that's a variable expense. And since the sales have come down, therefore the royalty has also come down. And so therefore the reduction that you see on other expenses partially because of that. And of course there has been some impact on account of cost reduction on certain areas that we've talked about, overheads that we've kind of controlled in the first half, second quarter as well. So it's a combination of the two.
Okay. And on the gross margin side, if I look at, there has been a fair bit of stability despite increase in discounts. So, and that is entirely a reflection of our cost-cutting initiatives and localization efforts, or there is some benefit also of commodity reflecting there?
So there is definitely a cost reduction, the material cost reduction initiative that we take in the beginning of the year. Also, we got some positive on account of commodity prices going down. And as I mentioned to you, overall effort of reducing overheads across all verticals. This is a combination of the three factors.
Okay. Any sense on what would be commodity savings in this quarter?
The commodity impact in this quarter would be could be small. It's not very significant, but the cost reduction will be a larger piece.
Okay. But any sense on what that number would be, cost reduction?
I think the commodity impact comes with a lag effect. So this quarter it will be very small. I mean, it's not very material. But moving forward, you will see better impact on commodity as, the commodity cost curves have gone down. And we will see quarter 3 and quarter 4 seeing much bigger impact on commodity.
Okay, understood. And lastly, in terms of inventory, so where we are at the beginning of festive and what would be our target at the end of festive season on inventory levels?
If you're asking for network, so network stock should be around that 32 days types of.
This is currently?
Currently, yes.
Okay. And post-festive, this should come down materially, or we would be building up inventory?
No, I think I am assuming that this would be the range anyway, because we are also sending vehicles, right? So. Right.
Okay. And with respect to our diesel models, particularly where which won't be transiting to BS6, what is our strategy, particularly products like Brezza, which is only diesel? So by when do we plan to launch petrol there?
Yeah, so we will be converting the Brezza to the BS6 petrol, as we have already announced, before the end of this financial year.
Okay, understood. Great, sir. Thanks and all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next question is from the line of Joseph George from IIFL Securities. Please go ahead.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity. Just a couple of questions. One is, could you give us a sense of what your full year tax rate would be given the new announcements by the government?
We have a 5% reduction on the effective tax rate for the full year. And our effective tax rate earlier was about 28%. So now it will go down to about 23% or maybe shade lower than 23%.
Got it. And so the second question that I had was, talked about the good booking numbers for the Espresso. But in your analysis, do you find that it's cannibalizing into some of your existing models, similar segments, or do you think a large part of this is incremental volumes?
Yeah, it's I think too early to judge that, because we have seen an upturn in the other models in the segment as well. But that's, I think, because the overall market itself has gone up. So the cannibalization, if any, and the extent of it, we will be able to judge only after we see a more sort of normal period of sustained numbers going forward.
Okay, sir. And the last question that I had was in relation to the demand scenario. So you mentioned that the first 10 days of Navratras were, a slight growth on a year-on-year basis. Has that continued, post Dussehra, which is another 2 weeks after Dussehra? That was the first part. And second part is, given the kind of a turnaround that we have seen, compared to the declines that we were seeing earlier, do you think this is kind of a sustainable thing? Or, for instance, we were talking to some of the two-wheeler companies last few days, and the sense we got is that they are also seeing flattish or slight growth kind of a scenario in the festive season, but none of them had the confidence to say that this momentum will continue going into November, December. So is the PV scenario similar to what the two-wheeler guys are saying, or are you all seeing higher confidence in the sustaining?
No, exactly the same. By the way, Navratra, it's not first 10 days. The Navratra period was 10 days total. And we have seen that retail continuing at a good pace even subsequent to that. So we have to see how the Dhanteras, which is tomorrow, and how leading up to Diwali, how the sales go before we arrive at any conclusion. But I would completely agree with the two-wheeler manufacturer's assessment as well, which is that we need to look at these numbers for a longer period of time before concluding that this is a sustained growth back in the auto industry.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next question is from the line of Aditya Makharia from HDFC. Please go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to know if you have any broad market share targets in the medium term. I believe there was some statement made by, your people in Japan recently.
So as we just pointed out, our market share in H1 was 49.8. So there seems to be, when targets are rounded off, targets are always great. So it looks like I mean, obviously, we'll try to increase it, whatever is the market share we have.
Okay, and just any developments on the hybrid side? Anything we can talk about?
What kind of developments of it?
Like in the sense launch timelines or, because there's just so much noise around EVs in general.
No, so we are working on the technologies, but there's a viability gap which can be corrected by the government, and we are waiting for the right policy for that.
Okay, got you. Thanks.
Thank you. Next question is from the line of Raghunandan from MK Global. Please go ahead.
Thank you, sir, for the opportunity. A couple of questions. Firstly, any update on company's efforts on strengthening the marketing infrastructure, on providing land parcels or showrooms to dealers on lease? Secondly, are you seeing any improvement in customer sentiment in especially the rural salaried segments, and what would be the rural share?
On the first part of your questions regarding the reality part, we are going ahead as per plan, and for the sites which we have actually taken, we are now in the process of making them functional. So that was our focus regarding that. On the second part of the question, did I hear you say the rural sales thing?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So rural sale it has degrown this year, but at a lesser rate than the urban growth. So urban degrowth is higher than the rural one. But rural one is also substantial. It's about 18% down. Rural share of the total sale for Maruti Suzuki is around 39% now.
Thank you, sir. And so, can you just, again mention the discounts number? I missed it earlier.
Discounts in this quarter were at 25,761 per vehicle.
Got it, sir.
Compared to 18,758 last year, same quarter.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next question is from the line of Gunjan Pratyani from JP Morgan. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi, sir. Thanks for taking my questions. Just a follow-up on this inventory. Of the inventory that is there with the channel, would you be able to give us some sense of how much would it be of BS4 versus BS6?
If you include the diesel vehicles, madam, then it would be roughly 50-50 types.
And excluding diesel vehicles, how would that be? I mean, it's largely BS6 now.
Yeah, so 70% of our sales in the petrol in the BS6 come from these BS6 models which we have launched.
Okay, and the other thing which you mentioned that 30 days is the normal inventory levels that you're comfortable with now, and we're pretty much there. So is it a fair assumption that if, let's say, the positive trends on retail continue, our wholesales should also be tracking the numbers here? I mean, there's no cleanup which is yet to be done here since, you're fairly advanced as far as the transition goes.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. If retail happen at whatever pace, wholesale should happen. But there is a caveat which I must add whenever I mention this number of days. For example, if you sell 100 cars and your stock is 100, we will say then it is 30 days of stock. However, if next month it falls to 50, then that same stock will become 2 months stock.
Sure.
So we need to look at that. So when we say 30 days, it is with respect to running 3-month retail. So in that sense, yes, if the retail continue then at this rate, then probably wholesale will obviously follow that.
So this 30 is based on July, August, September. August trend is not included in that, right? Because August, I'm assuming, is going to be materially higher. Sorry, October is going to be materially higher.
So October is not included, but August is included.
Okay, got it. And on the financing, in the initial comments, you mentioned that there has been some reduction on the financing side. Have you seen that change during the festive? Like, there's more willingness to give out financing, and in your portfolio, how would that be panning out now?
It's of course in the corresponding period have gone. It's of course in the corresponding period have gone. It's of course in the corresponding period have gone. It's of course in the corresponding period have gone. It's of course in the corresponding period have gone. It's of course in the corresponding period have gone down by almost 115 points or so. So yes, there has been some even in terms of the upfront payment, which is the down payment, initial down payment. Some of the banks with whom we have talked are now doing 100% financing on road. So and there are I think 6-7 big banks who are doing that. So yes, there seems to have been a little more positive scenario on the financing front.
And what would be the penetration level? Has it remained same?
Yes, so it is around 80%, which is similar. However, I must again put a caveat that normally we look at the finance percentage, which does not really mean much because you have to see the rejection rate, which is a much better measure. Unfortunately, we don't have a formal system from the banks to have that measure.
Okay, and just last, what is the CNG share now in the overall volumes?
The CNG share is, of course, model to model, it varies. But CNG share is like, one thing. Just one second. Can you give me a minute? Roughly 7%. But of course, model to model, it's different. CNG percentage varies from, okay, it is roughly 7%, yeah.
Okay, got it. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you. Next question is from the line of Rakesh Kumar from BNP Paribas. Please go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you for taking my question. My first question was just a follow-up on BS4 inventory, which you talked about half of your inventory would be BS4 models. Can you give us a sense in number of days? What would that be going by the model sales?
So for the models where we have BS6 vehicles introduced, you mean to say that?
So BS4 model inventory in number of days?
Yeah, for which models?
BS4 models which you have.
All of them put together, including diesel, etc.?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, that would be roughly 15, I would say.
15 days of inventory. Yes. I'm looking at the gross margin which we have reported this quarter, which has expanded by 30 basis points sequentially, despite close to around 16% volume decline sequentially. You talked about that you had some cost reduction benefit during the quarter. Can you take us through that, how sustainable those cost reductions are? And also we see that you had significantly higher production as well during the quarter. So how you would be managing those factory inventories in the coming quarters?
So on the cost reduction, I think this is a running program, and we've got it across the company in terms of bringing the cost down, and I'll also mention that there is a significant cost reduction also on the materials side, which is our annual running program, where we work on various initiatives on cost reduction. So besides the normal, cost reduction program that we run every year, there's a special effort to look at all overheads across the company. And we are trying to work on all of our discretionary spends and other expenses. And we have been able to bring them down in the first half. And I think moving forward also, if we continue to find the situation not improving, we will put stricter controls on the overheads.
And about the factory inventory, which is close to around 47,000.
Factory inventory was at roughly about 50,000 units.
So do you plan to liquidate that in the next quarter?
Yeah, so this obviously, as I think my colleague mentioned, that the retails are looking good in this month. A lot of this now would be, already gone from the factory, or it will be in the process of moving from the factory. So I think this inventory will significantly come down in the next 1 or 2 months.
Great. And my final question was, you talked about small positive growth which you saw during the Navratri phase. Can you just take us through, do you see any pattern in the rural and urban market, any distinction in the growth, or do you see across the geography growth during the festival season?
Yeah, so it's largely across geographies, but of course, as in any period, you will have some differences between one place to the other.
Great. Thank you. I'll fall back in the queue.
Thank you. Next question is from the line of Ronak Sarda from Systematic Shares. Please go ahead.
Hi, team. Thanks for the opportunity. So my first question is, given your readiness with BS6 and, the transition which we've already seen, but the competition is still at BS4, and they would see that transition in mostly in Q4. How do you see the competitive intensity at that point of time? Do you see a situation where the discounts don't fall below the current mark, and would we participate in a similar scenario?
Yeah, you are referring to the BS4 fire sale, right?
Kind of, if the transition doesn't take place smoothly.
So as I mentioned, for us, we have a much lower stock of BS4 for the models where we have introduced the BS6. So I am not sure what the competitors would be planning to do with their BS4 stock. Obviously, it depends on their production levels and their wholesale and the network stock, etc., etc. But I can say one thing that finally it will depend on the how much value consumers see in the BS6 models. At the moment, we see good traction with consumers regarding BS6.
Sure. And just to follow up on this, I mean, are we seeing any indication of some pickup happening in diesel variants? Do you see some pre-buying, especially on the fleet side, or maybe Desire or any other model where on the diesel side we may see some pre-buying happening?
Yeah, so if we look at overall the diesel sale also reflect the changes, except that the percentage of sale of diesel in the industry has been coming down, as you know. So like in H1, it has come down to almost like 20 to 23% for Maruti. And for the industry, overall, it has come down from 38 to 33%.
Okay, sure, sir. And the second question is on the raw material side. I mean, if I look at your presentation, you have highlighted raw material cost as slightly a headwind. Is it more of an amber color versus which would have think that would be a green color given, you know, the commodity cost, especially steel, has fallen sharply over the last few months. Ajay sir, if you can just clarify again, I mean, do you see the benefits coming in or in the second half on the steel price cut?
As I mentioned to you that in the second half you will see certainly some reductions on commodities because commodities barring palladium all across have fallen. So steel also will give us some benefit. Besides that, even the other commodities will give us some benefit. The only exceptional commodity to watch is palladium, where the costs have actually gone up. But I think on an overall basis, there will be a reduction on commodity prices in the second half.
Sure, sir. And any range which you can highlight is this, because we are hearing steel costs have fallen almost 20%.
We are under negotiation with all the steel suppliers at the moment. But I think the reduction should be reasonably good. We can't quantify the number at this point in time, but we are hoping that the reduction would be in line with what the market is.
Okay. Thank you and all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next question is from the line of Pramod Amte from CJS. Please go ahead.
Hi, sir. Couple of questions. One, are you surprised by the demand recovery in the festival?
Short answer is no, but we are definitely relieved. The reason is that we've been seeing inquiry uptick for some time, but conversion was a little less. But fortunately, we have seen this conversion happening in this period.
Okay. And considering that your ASP discounts are at historic high levels, how do you see that in the context that you have been early to adopt BS6 as compared to competition? Hence, are you forced to give out discounts as you have taken the price hike earlier than peers and you have some disadvantage, or this is a normal course to clear out the inventory?
Yeah, so I think it's a normal market. It's basically a response to the market condition. And we also see that competition has also very aggressive discount campaigns going.
But you don't feel you have a disadvantage in the short term for early BS6 adoption?
No, as I said, if consumers, I think, are finding great value in BS6 vehicles. and therefore that offsets the increased prices which we may have had.
And second is to Ajay. Sir, considering that there has been a substantial slowdown in volume, in that context, what has been the Capex, and are you reviewing the Capex plan for the full year?
This year we will end up at about 4,000 crores of Capex. So we will be in line with our plan. We have not changed any course in terms of our plans with respect to medium to long term. So we are going ahead with whatever our Capex plans are.
Okay, sure. Thanks and all the best.
Thank you. Next question is from the line of Binay Singh from Morgan Stanley. Please go ahead.
Hi team, thanks for the opportunity. Just continuing on the discount side, like if you see discounts in this quarter are more than a bit per car. So from 25,000 levels, how do you see them going ahead? Like in October and all, have they inched higher?
Well, see, as my colleague mentioned, that discounts is largely driven by what the market conditions are. So if demand over a period improves, the discounts will also correct over the period. But if demand continues to be weak, then obviously there will be discounts in the market. You know, it's a chicken and egg problem that you have, all of us have got surplus capacity, and if we don't utilize it, then, you know, you are actually sitting on a huge fixed cost overhang. So you have to choose between the devil and the deep sea.
So, but in October, so discounts are higher than even 25,000 rupees per unit.
Sure, they are. Sure they are.
And secondly, is it one of the earlier questions on diesel? So is it fair to assume that on 1st of April 2020, Maruti will not have any diesel, Ertiga or any of the offerings in any engine CC?
I think it's a fair assumption. But of course, as we have said, we will keep studying the market. Should there be requirement for Euro 6 diesel, BS6 diesel, then we will take a relook at it and accordingly develop our product plan.
Right. And lastly, just on the segment mix, you know, because we've seen pretty sharp change in segment mix, which you also talked about that, small car share has shrunk. Now that you've seen some sort of retail sales recovery and you also had a model launch, how do you see the segment mix going ahead? You know, do you think this is a short-term phenomena or the customer, even entry-level customer, is straight away jumping to mid-segment and bigger products?
Really, I think what we mentioned was the passenger car, SUV, MUV, and the van segments. Need not necessarily be the first-time buyer, entry-level buyer, or a replacement buyer, or a additional car buyer. So yes, in the A segment, which is the hatch plus sedan, this is passenger car segment, we saw a fall from 66% to 61%, and it's been going on for some time now. And as far as SUV is concerned, also in the last few years, if you have seen, it has been going up from almost like 18-19% to 34% today. And van segment has relatively been stable between 8 to 6% last year, and it has gone down to 5.3% in H1 of this year. So I think there is it's not a short-term thing. We need to study and see because it seems to be a trend rather than just a one-off thing.
So then we hope that, Maruti's future product portfolio is also more aligned to these segments, because currently you are heavily reliant on the passenger car space.
Yeah, so yes, but of course, A segment passenger car is still 61% of the total market.
And just lastly, if I could squeeze, what is the first-time buyer number now?
First-time buyer for Maruti Suzuki is around 47%.
Great. So it used to be around 51%, I think, in the previous quarter. So that's come down in this quarter.
No, not really. I think this has also been fairly stable for last. So it may go up and down month on month or this thing, but it has really been around that level for so many years, actually, even for the last few years, 10, 15 years.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, that was the last question for today. I would now like to hand the conference back to the management for closing comments.
Thanks a lot to all our investors and analysts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf